375 total laps, 2 races, 1 day, Easter weekend at Rockingham Speedway, and the man behind the wheel for both of them is not a seasoned NASCAR veteran with years of Cup Series experience. He is a content creator with nearly 5 million YouTube subscribers and over 2 billion views. And he just said something in a media call this week that every single one of his critics needed to hear. The NASCAR world has been divided over Cleetus McFarland for over a month. That division ended this week. And if you are still not paying attention to what is happening here, this is the moment you catch up. Cleetus McFarland is not a name that came through the traditional NASCAR development pipeline. He built his career on social media and automotive entertainment, not on years of karting, late-model racing, and methodical ladder climbing. His racing resume coming into 2026 consisted of 5 ARCA races and 1 NASCAR Truck Series start. That one Truck Series start came at Daytona, and it ended in a crash after just 5 laps. The entire sport watched it happen. So the question that NASCAR media members, podcast hosts, and fans have been asking for over a month is straightforward. Should a YouTube creator with that resume be competing at NASCAR's second highest level? That debate has now been running publicly for more than 30 days without stopping. This Saturday at Rockingham Speedway, Cleetus is not making one appearance. He is racing twice on the same day. At noon, he runs the ARCA Menards East 125. Then he climbs out of that car and gets directly into a Richard Childress Racing machine for the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, 250 laps. Add those 2 races together and the total is 375 laps at one of the most technically demanding tracks on the schedule. The entire NASCAR world is watching every single lap. Fox Sports reporter Bob Pockrass asked Cleetus directly during a media call this week whether he pays attention to what the critics are saying or blocks it out entirely. Cleetus did not dodge the question. He addressed it head-on. "Bob, I think you know at this point that I'm pretty in tune with what's going on in the social media world. This is my job. My job is probably more similar to yours than closer to the drivers. I am a social media guy. That's how I got in this position, so I see it a lot." That answer matters because it removes any pretense. Cleetus is not pretending the criticism does not exist. He reads it. He knows exactly what people are saying. And he showed up to that media call anyway and answered every question directly. He also acknowledged that the Daytona truck crash hurt. Spinning out and wrecking in front of a national audience in your first ever Truck Series start after just 5 laps is a difficult public moment for any driver. Cleetus admitted he was feeling down on himself after that race. But then he said something that has now circulated across every NASCAR media outlet this week. "At this point, the record is so broken of people still talking about it. I don't care as much." And then came the line that answered every critic at once. "At the end of the day, all these guys can say whatever they want about me. But if Richard Childress called them and said, 'Hey, want to come drive our car?' all of them would have taken that opportunity too. Again, if NASCAR is letting me do it, I'm in. I'm here. No one can save me but myself at this point. Once I get on that track on Saturday, it's up to me. They can complain as much as they'd like, but it's happening and it's for 2 years, so they better buckle up." For 2 years. That is the detail that much of the public conversation has missed entirely. This is not a 1-race promotional entry. This is a 3-race per year deal for 2 full years, a contracted multi-season arrangement. Cleetus McFarland is not going anywhere. The deal involved RCR, Tommy's Express Car Wash, and O'Reilly Auto Parts. According to Cleetus, someone from the RCR side reached out and indicated they had noticed he could benefit from professional driver development support. Cleetus laughed when recounting it and said he absolutely needed that help. Wow, from that conversation, a full sponsorship and racing deal was structured with one of the most respected organizations in the history of NASCAR. What Cleetus actually did to prepare for Rockingham is where the narrative shifts completely. Beginning approximately 2 months before his test day at the track, he committed to his home racing simulator every single day and running laps specifically in the O'Reilly's car setup mapped to the Rockingham track layout. Over those 2 months of daily work, the fastest lap time he could produce on the simulator was 2:40. That was his absolute ceiling. He could not go any quicker regardless of how much he pushed. Then came the actual test day at Rockingham with the full RCR operation behind him. He ran over 250 laps that day. Crew chief Danny Stockman was present throughout. Four data analysts attended the test with the sole responsibility of reading and interpreting car data. Laptops were set up across the pit area. A rolling toolbox was pulling live telemetry from the car while Cleetus was driving every single lap. The level of professional infrastructure surrounding that test day was the same infrastructure that supports full-time NASCAR drivers at the highest level. Cleetus said he learned more about driving in that single day than he had in his entire life. He returned home after the test, sat back down at his simulator, and within 13 laps, he beat his previous best time by 0.4 of a second. A lap time he had spent 2 full months trying to break. Gone in 13 laps after one professional test day with RCR. These figures come from his personal simulator data, which cannot be independently verified by outside parties. However, the account is consistent with everything RCR has publicly stated about the coaching and data investment they have been putting into his development. At Rockingham, 0.4 of a second is a significant margin. He also studied the driving data of Jesse Love during the test, which Cleetus identified as the single most useful tool available to him, a direct data overlay showing him precisely where he was losing time, particularly entering corners. Jesse Love subsequently came to work with Cleetus on the simulator in the days leading into race weekend. On top of all of that, RCR provided Cleetus with time on the Chevy simulator, a $10 million motion-based machine that physically moves and responds like a real stock car at speed. The critics are not entirely wrong. He and Cleetus himself would likely acknowledge that. Eric from Out of the Groove made the most coherent case against his entry this week, clarifying that the criticism is largely directed at NASCAR's approval and licensing process rather than at Cleetus as an individual. The legitimate question is whether the sport's entry standards are sufficient to protect the field when someone with limited experience is placed at this level. Eric used Lee Pulliam as a direct example. Pulliam is a respected veteran short-track racer. He made his first O'Reilly Series start at Martinsville just last weekend, ran inside the top 5, and was actively competing for the win, before missing a shift and triggering a multi-car incident. If a driver with Pulliam's experience level can produce that outcome in his first start at this level, while the margin for error with less experience becomes even narrower, Cleetus has already experienced his own version of that moment. At Charlotte, he was positioned on the front row in the outside lane, spun the tires on the restart, and caused a wreck. His own assessment of that moment was direct. The worst part is knowing you just messed up a bunch of other people's days. For Saturday, Cleetus has 2 distinct and separate game plans. In the ARCA Menards East 125 at noon, he intends to race aggressively. On his own podcast, he stated that he believes he has the preparation to potentially win the ARCA race. The O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at 2:30 is an entirely different calculation. Cleetus has been explicit that the skill gap between himself and the drivers in that field is very significant. His stated objectives for that race are to finish, stay out of everyone's way, learn, keep the car straight, and be smart on restarts. On the qualifying front, the withdrawal of Nick Sanchez and AM Racing left 38 cars for 38 available spots, meaning Cleetus is entered without needing to qualify on pace. Eric from Out of the Groove projected a finish around 25th place, approximately 2 laps down, and stated that result would constitute a genuinely successful day, and could position Cleetus to receive NASCAR approval for Talladega later in the spring. There was one moment from this week's media coverage that carried weight beyond racing. Cleetus spoke about his close friend Greg Biffle, who passed away over the winter. This whole process would be a lot more fun with Greg. I think about that a lot. I miss my buddy. He said Biffle would have recognized that he was not fully ready for this level, but would have told him to do it anyway. Dale Earnhardt Jr. delivered the same message when Cleetus sought his perspective. Take the chance. The broader context of what Cleetus McFarland represents to NASCAR in 2026 is measurable. He is bringing an audience of millions to a sport that many of those viewers only understood as a cultural stereotype. NASCAR is a data-intensive, technically complex, physically demanding form of motorsport. Brad Keselowski, a driver with 20 years of Cup Series experience, still studies film every week to maintain his competitive level. The sport does not simplify itself for anyone who arrives unprepared, regardless of their background. Cleetus is learning that in real time, on real tracks, Get in front of a real audience. ARCA at noon. O'Reilly's at 2:30, Rockingham Speedway, Easter Saturday. 375 laps, 2 races, 1 day. The critics have had their say for over a month. Cleetus McFarland answered them this week with one of the most direct statements any driver has delivered in a media call this season. Now the answer has to come from the track. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Does Cleetus finish the O'Reilly's race, or do the doubters get proven right on Saturday? If you want the full post-race breakdown the moment it happens, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is not over, and the next chapter gets written this weekend.